Excellent. And if you have any questions during the course of our presentation, please feel free to locate your chat bubble on your Join Me toolbar and send a question over to us, and we'll be happy to respond to you. Marquita Grant is serving as our co-presenter, so definitely feel free again to shoot her a question and she will respond. Please note that our presentation is in presentation mode, thus there is only one-way verbal communication. So let's get started. The Georgia Department of Education and the Georgia Career Information Center have partnered together to provide access to the Georgia Career Information System, or GCIS, and the administration tools to every public middle school and high school in the state of Georgia. As a new high school site coordinator, you'll have an opportunity to use the administration tools to support your career advisement efforts at your schools. During today's presentation, we will explore the administration tools' basic website layout, see how to manage your students' portfolios, learn about the high school advisement milestones, and generate their respective reports. In addition to participating in today's session, I definitely encourage you to also visit our YouTube page to watch some of the other related webinars, such as GCIS for new high school users. It, too, will give you some excellent pointers on implementing GCIS at your individual high schools. So let's begin our session by visiting the administration tools. And to access the administration tools, you would simply go to www.gcic.peachnet.edu. And when you enter that specific URL, this will take you to the Georgia Career Information Center's homepage. And when you're looking at this particular page, you'll see it kind of looks like it's divided into 3 columns, if you will. And in that first column, you'll see an entry point that says, click here to enter the Georgia Career Information System. And before I actually go to that entry point, please note that there is a link to go to those videos that I just talked about a second ago in that lower left-hand corner. So I'm going to come back up to the top and click where it says, click here to enter Georgia Career Information System. And this will take me to a login screen that will request a username and a password. And so this would be the same page that your students will use to enter their individual portfolio username and password. We have adopted a single sign-on paradigm where your username and password will actually denote where you would go within the system. So for today's purposes, we will enter an administration tool's username and password. To obtain your school's administration tool's username and password, you must be designated in writing as your school's GCIS Site Administrator. This process can be completed by your superintendent, your CTAE director, director of student support services, or even your principal. And once we receive that written confirmation from a school administrator, we can release that username and password to the GCIS Site Administrator. When we release that username and password, you can elect to either keep it for yourself as the main GCIS Site Administrator, or you can share it with your colleagues. If you choose to keep that main username and password for yourself, you would have an opportunity to create what are called staff accounts, which would allow you to assign individual usernames and passwords to your colleagues. GCIC will not share this information with anyone other than the pre-approved individuals at your Board of Education or you as the individual site administrator. So for today's presentation, I'm going to go ahead and enter mine. Forgot a letter. There you go. Ta-da! Okay. So once I enter my username and password, and you'll have this very same page, it will offer you an opportunity to set security questions. So if you were to ever forget your password for any reason, you'd actually have an opportunity to answer a few security questions, and once you answer them successfully, you'll receive a temporary password that will then allow you to go into the system. So I'm going to go ahead and skip my questions for now to take us directly into the website. So once you log into your administration tools, there are a couple of places that will definitely tell you where you are. So we will start at the top of the page where it actually has the administration tools logo denoted at the top. So you'll see it will say Georgia Information System Administration. And then on the right-hand side, it will read your school's name. So in this case, we're at Jane Doe High School North, and you will see that it has site administration immediately to the right of the school name. So again, two ways that you can denote whether you're in the student side or your side as the administrator. On that right-hand side, you will see that it says Site, and there's like a little drop-down menu. And when you click on that little drop-down arrow, it will actually allow you to look at your account settings. And as your GCIS Site Administrator, you would be able to populate in your first and your last name, as well as your email address. Now, if you've already been identified as your school's administrator, this information will already have been changed to your name and your email address. And then you also have another opportunity to select your security question, enter your answers, and make those true for your system, again, so that you can use that as an opportunity to get back into the administration tools. Continuing in that upper right-hand corner, you'll have a little messaging center. And on this messaging center, you have an opportunity to send and receive messages between you and your students, as well as other staff account holders if you decide to implement those, and parents if you were to have set up accounts for them as well. So it allows for you to communicate with a myriad of individuals who are engaging in career development with your students. And the last item that you see on that far right-hand corner is Log Out. As you guys know, as high school practitioners, these systems keep student records, and you want to keep this information away from those who do not have a need to visit this information. Logging out will shut out your session with this system and will require you to log in a second time. I am going to go over to that left-hand side. This particular logo not only tells you about the system, but it also is a way for you to return to the main page. So when I click on Georgia Information System Administration, this will take me back to my dashboard on the front page. And that will be true for all pages within the system. Another way that you can always navigate back to your first page is by clicking on that house in the upper left-hand corner. On your dashboard, you have several elements that will kind of help you to see a summary of what is occurring at your individual school. And so on that particular summary page, you'll have a login table, you'll have a portfolio account table, and you'll have modules with saved records. Your login table will actually show you the different types of logins that have occurred over the course of your school using the GCIS platform. So portfolios represents the number of times that an active portfolio user has logged into the system. And in you guys' case, a portfolio user is synonymous to your high school students. So this is where they are logging in with their personal individual username and password. And you can see to date, and you'll see that this report begins on on August 1st, 2006, I've had 5 students to actually log in. The next section you'll see in your logins would be site username. Now, each one of your schools, again, has a username and password that is assigned to the school in addition to the site administrator. So the school's username and password would allow students to explore the various resources. However, it is not assigned to a specific person. The portfolio is person-specific, which would allow the students to explore and save information. So the best case scenario is where you have more portfolio users, i.e. students, logging into the system as opposed to site users who would be the individuals that are not able to save information. And then the last way that you would log in, again, if you decide to implement this, is as a staff account holder. So you as a site administrator can elect to set up staff accounts for your colleagues. Continuing down that page, your next table would be portfolio accounts. And you will see the number of active portfolios that you have at your site. And so this would be the number of students who have records at your school. And so portfolio logins and actual portfolios will always differ. So you could theoretically have one student who is logged in 5 times or 5 students that have logged in 1 time each. And then you can also see how many portfolios that you have created since a specific time period. And again, August 1st is always the default day. And in that last table, you have modules with saved records. And so this will become important to you as you start to introduce the individual milestone reports, because a lot of the information will also duplicate here. So I will just go ahead and point out for 11th grade students, they have to save at least 3 post-secondary schools. And so if you look at the very bottom, you'll see that one of my students has actually started saving schools, and I can actually run a report and figure out who that student is and what that student has actually done in terms of what's inside of that file. Over on your right-hand side of the screen, you have what are called helps and tutorials. And these are just various videos in which you can watch little helpful handouts that will help you to implement various components throughout the administration tools. And coincidentally, help and tutorials actually also appears inside of your students' GCIS website, so they too can implement various items. Directly below the helps and tutorials, you have what are called quick links, which are just very quick ways to get to frequently visited elements in terms of navigating through the administration tools and managing your students' information. So you have reset passwords. So should your students have started forgetting their passwords, you can actually reset them en masse or individually. You can locate an individual student's portfolio. You can implement curriculum. Now, with GCIS, it not only just covers the mandates that are stipulated by the Georgia Department of Education, but it can actually be used in various classroom settings, such as if you have a careers class, or if you're trying to do an entire year's worth of coursework, you have curriculum points here that actually give you lesson plans so that you can set up your curriculum for that course or for that year. There are PowerPoints in here, there are lesson plans, there are activities, there's a whole host of different elements that you can use to include GCIS in several parts of your school's activities. You also have tools for counselors and teachers. Again, more handouts and implementation guides, manuals that you can use that will help your navigation of the system. And finally, under quick links, you have privacy statement. Inside of GCIS, your students get to denote how much information you as the site administrator can see within their individual portfolios. So they will have an opportunity to say, yes, my counselor or site administrator can see what's going on in my portfolio, and you would have carte blanche access to that student's portfolio. Or they may say, no, you cannot see what's going on in my portfolio, and you would only have very limited access to that information. You, as a site administrator, can decide to turn that function on or off for all students so that it's always yes for your students, or allow them to decide. I have a question on the side. Can staff account reset passwords, or does it need to be in the site administration? Staff account holders, after you set up their initial staff account, yes, they will have an opportunity to reset their own information. So be sure, if you do decide to create a staff account, to include the email address so they can then take on that task for themselves. All right, great question. And the last thing that I want to show you on your dashboard is that you have a couple of announcements that kind of point out some of the highlights within the system and be able to see their information. The next question I see on the chat window is, can staff account holders reset passwords for students? Absolutely. They too can reset for your students. All right, great questions going on in the chat window. So now that we've covered the basic layout of the body of the main page, you have an opportunity to look at the various items on the horizontal navigation bar. And on this bar, you'll see that there are different subject areas, and we will go through each one of those items. And I have a question. How do we turn off the privacy statement for all students so that we can see their portfolios? All right, so I'll actually start with that one since that's a question that you guys have. So I will start on the right-hand side where it says Help and Links. And under the Help and Links tab, you will see that there is an element that has your description of what occurs on this particular item. You have two columns that actually give you options in which you can engage in. So you can see under News, What's New. You have Tutorials and More, which would be your tools for counselors and teachers and curriculum, which were also under your quick links. And then what I want to do is click on Portfolio Privacy. And when I click on Portfolio Privacy, it starts to talk about the privacy statement. If I want to modify that element, when you get back to your school, you'll have an opportunity to click on it, and it'll say, do you want to modify this for your school? And you'll say, yes, I want to change this, and it'll make it true for all of your students. Okay? So yes, you will have an opportunity to do that, and to finish that out, you would go to the next column that is Customize, set your portfolio privacy options, and here's where you change it. Let your user decide, always opt in. And Mary, if you want them to always say yes, click always opt in, and it sets it right for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on always opt in, save changes, and this is true for all of my students. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to continue going right to left, and I'm going to hover over the other accounts. And we were talking about staff accounts a little bit earlier. Let's go ahead and jump into that. So on your other accounts section, you have an opportunity to set up staff accounts for your colleagues if you so choose. And if you wanted to, you could also set up parent accounts to attach to the student accounts. Being that this is a beginner level presentation, some of these elements you'll actually be able to view on another webinar that we actually just did yesterday that talks about some of those advanced features and the setting up the maintain parent accounts that's on that advanced features webinar. But if you wanted to begin to make staff accounts, you would click on Add New Staff Account, and you would simply pop in a username, password, that staff member's first and last names, their email address, and you would simply click on add, and that staff account holder would receive their username and password information and their email address. So I'm going to quickly put one together for you. And when she logs into her email address, she will see that she has a username and password that would allow her to log in as a staff account holder. Now, as a staff account holder, they can see 80% of the functions that you have as the main site administrator. They cannot see other staff account holders' information. They cannot change the course planner and the courses that appear on the course planner, and they cannot change the privacy statement. Everything else they will have access to the same way that you would. So does that make sense to everyone? If you'll just give me a yes on the chat window to share that you know how to set up staff accounts. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let's continue going from right to left. Let's hover over portfolios and groups. So you will spend a lot of your time under the portfolios and groups section because this is where you can actually come in and manage your students' portfolios. You can reset their passwords. You can locate whether they have a portfolio at your school. You can add an individual portfolio. You can upload them, hide them, transfer them, put them into groups. Again, you will spend a lot of time in this section because there's a lot of rich resources in this particular section. So let's go ahead and talk about how to create a portfolio for one individual student. So I'm going to go to the bottom of this particular page under the Add Portfolio subsection and click Add One Portfolio. And I have a great question on the chat window. Can students reset their own passwords? The answer is yes, they can reset their own passwords. They can reset their own passwords provided that they remember their username and they remember the responses to their security questions that they have implemented. Great questions coming across in that chat window. All right, so to create an individual portfolio, you have a couple of text boxes that are denoted by two red asterisks. These indicate that these are required elements. So when you go to set up an individual portfolio for a student, you would enter a username for that particular student. And when you enter a username in our system, there are a couple of requirements. So in our system, a portfolio username needs to have a minimum of 6 characters. And it has to be unique in the state of Georgia. And so what a lot of my school districts have decided to do with their usernames and their with their usernames specifically, is that they are using a unique identifier as a part of that username. And some of them are tending toward using the last name plus a lunch ID. You can use first name dot last name. Again, please note that a lot of students have the same first name and last name, so you would want to add a number to that to ensure that it's unique for that student. Some are using GTID. Some are using district username and password. Using a district username that mirrors a username that the students are already familiar with. But again, it has to have a minimum of 6 characters and has to be unique in GCIS. So again, a minimum of 6 characters. The next element that you will implement would be a password for that student. Now, again, just to kind of give you some keys on making a password, inside of our system, it has to be a minimum of 8 characters. It has to have at least one capital letter, one lowercase letter, and a number. So again, some that are becoming popular right now, some are using last name, followed by the 6-digit birthday. I have some that are electing to use first initial, capitalized, last initial, lowercase, followed by a six-digit birthday. I have some that are actually electing to use the exact same password for all of their students. And so in our system, the only thing that has to be unique is that username. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in my student's name. First name and last name. Now, graduation year, you'll notice, is not denoted as a required field, but since you guys are running reports that are based on grade level, and in our system would be translated into graduation year, you want to make sure that you have grad years that are consistent, that are 4 digits long. And when you run your bridge report, it will be based on this particular grad year. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add. Or actually, before I click on Add, let me share this tidbit. When you guys make a portfolio one at a time, you are only setting up a temporary password. The student will have to change that password immediately. So again, if you are uploading in an individual portfolio, the student will be required to change that password. Now, let's say that you want all of your students still to have the same password. What you can do is you can type in a password that you don't want the permanent password to be, so the students will have an opportunity to select exactly what you do want it to be. So if you want all of your students to have password 1 as their permanent password, you can type in password 2. And when the student logs in with their username and password 2, it will say, what is your permanent password? And then you will instruct your student to type in password 1. It will say, verify your new password, and they will repeat password 1 and click add, and they will continue to access the system. The next time that they log in, they will use their username and password 1 and keep going. In your chat window, type if that makes sense to you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click add. Excellent, excellent. And so now I want to verify that that particular portfolio was accepted into the system. And so the way that you'll know that it was accepted is that it'll allow you to keep going. If it happened to be an error in there, it would have told you this username has already been taken, or this password doesn't have enough characters. All right, so to verify that that student has a portfolio, I'm on a page. I am on a page that would allow me to search for my students. And so if you were ever to start from the beginning and you wanted to get to this page, you'd simply hover over portfolios and groups and you go down to search portfolios. I have a great question on the side. If I am at an alternative school and I have students coming from several different schools who are using different methods for student usernames and passwords, then what I would encourage you to do, let me ask you this. Does your alternative school have its own GCIS account? And if not, what you can do is that you can actually have staff accounts. Okay. You can have staff accounts set up at those feeder schools that feed into you and be able to work with those students at their schools. You can also, if you decide to purchase your own license, you can create a new portfolio for those students specifically for your school. Or or what you can do is just make sure the students remember their usernames and passwords, and they can give you printouts of their reports. All right. So to make sure that this student's portfolio has been accepted, I have 4 ways in which I can look for a student. I can select based on their last name and type in a minimum of their first character. I can select a group if I've implemented such. I can look at them by graduation year, or I may want to see all of my students. In this case, we just wanted to look at that one student. And so I'm going to type in GO. I'm going to go to the bottom and click on under Select Portfolio Task Mode. Click on Do All Portfolio Tasks. And there's my student, Appaloosa Gordon. And I can see her username. If I had a unique ID there, I would see that. I can see the last date used, and I can see her graduation year. All right. Now, there is a second way that you can add portfolios to your roster, which is actually uploading several at the same time. And so this would be an opportunity for you to set the same portfolio for all of your students. And this would ensure that they're all on the same page in terms of username format and password format. Now, with this particular setup, you are setting the password, and the students do not necessarily have to change that password unless they want to. So I'm going to hover again over Portfolios and Groups. I'm going to go down to Upload Several Portfolios. And when I go to Upload Several Portfolios, I need to click on Portfolio Upload Template. And that will just download an Excel spreadsheet to my computer, and I would open that particular spreadsheet. And I actually have one that I started pre-populating for you guys. Can you guys see the spreadsheet on your screen? Excellent, excellent. All right. So on this spreadsheet, this is where you will need to begin pulling data from your SIS, because it'll be student record information. And by pulling data from your SIS, you will have an opportunity to kind of copy and paste information from whatever form you pull from there into this particular spreadsheet. All right. And so it would minimize the opportunity to kind of misalign students' information. So aligning, a student's name with someone else's student ID, you want to make sure that you kind of keep it together as much as possible. And so you will see on this template that columns A, B, C, and E are in green. The green ones are required. Now again, since we've been talking about your milestone reports, you would want to also include column F, grad year, in there. So column A is username, column B is password, C is student's first name, E is student's last name, and then you have graduation year. All other information on this page is optional, but you're welcome to populate it as you see fit. And so the requirements are exactly the same as when we were creating an individual portfolio. You would need to have a username that has a minimum of 6 characters. You would need to have a password that has a minimum of 8 characters with a capital letter, a lowercase letter, and a number. And you would enter the student's first name and last name, so on and so forth. Okay. So I'm going to I already have these students in here. And I'm going to go ahead and save this on my desktop. And I'm going to close it out. And this is going to take me back to my screen. I'm going to click Choose File. And if you're working in IE or Firefox, it's actually going to say Browse instead of Choose File. I'm going to click on the name of my file. I'm going to click on what is called Trial Run. And what happens here is that it's going to test my document to make sure that it is free of errors. And I'm going to click Upload Portfolios. And you will see that it will say Processing Status, Trial Import Completed, and I will have a status column that will let me know if there were any errors. And this one happens to be error-free. If you ever wanted to see what the possible errors are, there is a status code PDF that will show you all the potential errors that you may have. If you have a list of 1,000 students and 999 of them pass muster, but one of them has errors, none of the portfolios will move forward until you modify that one that presented the error code. Okay? So if one has an error code, none of them make the cut until you fix that one. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck Trial Run. I'm going to click on Choose File, locate my file, upload, and my status is now added. Is that pretty straightforward for you guys? I have a great question on the right-hand side. What happens if a student is retained for reporting as their graduation year? Would it change? You can definitely change a student's graduation year inside of our system. So if you needed to make a change to a student's information, what you would do is you would go up to Portfolios and Groups. You would search Portfolios. And let's say that you needed to change it for the student whose last name begins with G-O. I can then click on Generate Portfolio List, locate that student's name, and click Edit. The student is not a part of class of 2019. The student is actually a part of class of 2020. And when you run your report, that student will be a part of group 2020. So it's just that easy. All right, so everyone comfortable with uploading portfolios, with adding one portfolio, and with changing a student's graduation year? Awesome, awesome. Okay. The next tab again, continuing to the, going from right to left, are your reports. And on this Reports tab, GCIS allows you to run reports on a myriad of different elements that are within the system that go beyond the bridge law requirements. So if you wanted your students to take a series of assessments, you have an opportunity to run reports on that student's information. You have an opportunity to do a summary report. How many students are logging in? How frequently are they logging in? What username and passwords are they using? Have they started choosing programs to study? If so, what are the popular ones? Have you, your students selected schools that are of interest to you or to them? What are they? And you could actually use this information if you're having a college fair at your school. You can select the colleges that you invite based on the ones that are popular to your students. And so various ways that you can use these particular reports. I have a great question on the side. What happens to a student's profile when you delete it? For example, a student that has withdrawn. We encourage that you hide student portfolios as opposed to deleting portfolios, because that would allow the student to continue using their portfolio as well as allow another school to pick up that student's portfolio. So if you happen to have a case where you need to hide a student and they're no longer with you, again, that occurs on that Portfolio and Groups tab, and you will simply click on Hide Portfolios and navigate through those individual steps. And so it's a very quick way to hide student portfolios so that you are removing them from your active roster and making sure that you have clean data. So essentially just clicking on Hide Portfolios, clicking the box to the left of the names of the students you wish to hide, and clicking on Hide Selected Portfolio. If you have a student that you've hidden and you wish to bring them back, let's say a student left your school and came back, you can go back up to Portfolios and Groups, hover over View Hidden Portfolios, select the students you wish to unhide, and click on Hide Selected Portfolios. Is hiding a portfolio an administrator task only? That is correct. Administrators and staff account holders can hide student portfolios. Students cannot hide their portfolios. All right, let's get to the big topic of the day. What are my bridge requirements? So for your particular bridge requirement, there are several that are earmarked by the Georgia Department of Education, and I'm going to show those on the screen for you. So for bridge law requirements, 9th grade students are required to explore and investigate at least 3 occupations. Now, please note that 8th graders also have to explore 3 occupations, so these occupations have to be 3 additional occupations. The system will not count the same occupations for 2 years. So really, your students will need to have 6 occupations in the system to meet the benchmark. Inside of our system, 10th grade students will be introduced to Move On When Ready. And of course, you can introduce them to Move On When Ready before. You can talk about it afterward, but in GCIS, the reporting is for 10th grade. In 11th grade, your students will have to explore and save 3 post-secondary institutions. They can save it from the Georgia school file, which will allow them to see every 2-year, 4-year technical and career school, as well as any of those schools, or they can save them from the U.S. schools, where they can look according to individual states. Okay. So again, saving 3 post-secondary institutions. And lastly, 12th graders will tell you, now that you've received all of this wonderful information, what do you plan to do with it? So they will have to tell you what their next steps are. So 9th graders will save 3 additional occupations. 10th grade will share whether they've talked about or they've learned about Move On When Ready. 11th grade, 3 post-secondary schools. 12th grade, My Next Steps. Great question. For Move On When Ready, do students have to sign off on GCIS that they've learned about it? In GCIS, we do not stipulate how you deliver your activity. So you can have a guest speaker, you can give them a brochure, you can have them to engage with someone at the local institutions that support Move On When Ready. I would encourage you to have some type of paper trail. So if you're having them to sign a physical form saying, yes, I did receive this information, that is definitely something that you can do. Inside of our system, denoting whether Move On When Ready has been distributed, information regarding it is on an honor system. So you're actually checking off that you have provided this information. If you were ever audited, you need to have that paper trail so that you can prove, yes, this in fact occurred. Great question. And so now that we've looked at the individual elements, let's take a look at reporting that information inside of the administration tools. So I'm going to click on Home in the upper left-hand corner. Another great question, are 12th grade students responsible for all activities since we did not use GCIS in previous years? I think that's an excellent question. That is something that you would have to discuss within your school district. Some of the school districts are saying, yes, you need to complete all of this information because there's no paper trail stating or sharing where that information has been completed previously. So again, if you were ever audited, if you don't have proof of what you're saying, I wouldn't want you to end up in a situation where you have to go down that route. So again, that's something completely up to your school districts. I do have some that have said you will do all activities. And really, the activities are pretty straightforward, and the students can quickly complete them within a short span of time. So again, completely up to you guys, but it is doable. So I'm going to hover over Bridge. And now on the Bridge tab, you have the first column is just a quick description. We're going to go over to the data entry points that you at a high school will be able to use in order to support your students' records. So I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing that I need to do as a high school administrator is under the Bridge Law Data Entry subheader, I'm going to click on Student Enrollment. I need to let the system know how many students do I have in each grade level, as this is setting the denominator for the reports that you're getting ready to run. And so this would simply involve clicking on the word Edit and entering how many students you have per grade level. And this information can come from your SIS. And I'm going to click on Update. And when I click on Update, it's going to show me the last date and the time when this information was populated within the system. And so you can choose how frequently you would update that information. Some of my schools have decided to do weekly, some have done monthly. You want to keep this as accurate as possible because, again, this is how your percentages of completion are calculated. The next thing that you will do is, remember I said that the Move On When Ready is based on verification or the honor system? Under the data entry section, you'll go down to 10th grade Move On When Ready verification. This is where you are going to check off that your 10th grade students have been made aware of Move On When Ready. And so you may have a cohort of students whose last names begin with A through E that learned about it on Monday of this week, F through W on a different day, whatever. You can go in and check them off as you complete those activities, or you can wait to the end and select all students. Now, if you want to do it the first way, you can actually go through and cherry pick the students who have received that particular activity on a specific date. And so the first date that we did this would have been on August 15th. Let's say that all of my students whose last names begin with G, they now have their option. So I'm going to click on Save Changes, and you will see that the students with the last names that begin with G, their dates are today, whereas the other students were on the day that they actually received their particular activity. So it might be advantageous just to do it as you're going along, so that your principals and whomever can see that these efforts did not just occur on one day, that it took multiple sessions to make sure that all students were made aware over time. Okay. I'm going to go back and hover over the Bridge tab, and we're now going to go over to the Bridge Law Reports. All of these are real-time reports. So you can actually sit in a room with your iPad or your handheld device and keep clicking refresh, and it will update as your students are going through their activities. So I'm going to go down to ninth grade, 3 additional occupations. And when I go down to 3 additional occupations, it would show me which of my students have in fact started saving their occupations. Now, again, denote that I'm saying the word additional, because what should have happened is that in 8th grade, if you were using GCIS, your students would need to have saved 3, and in the 9th grade, they would save 3 additional. If this is the only place where you have documentation stipulating that your students have saved their occupations, then your 9th graders will need to save 6 to see C for complete on this particular report. And so you will see on this report, it tells you the name at the very top of the report. It gives the name of the school immediately below. I can see that this report is telling me percent of 9th grade students who have explored and saved 3 additional occupations. It will show me the percent of students that have completed the activity. At this time, I've not introduced this activity this year, but as I start going along, I will start to see changes. And so right now it's showing me that none of my students, 0, which represents my report, out of the 7, which I stipulated under my Bridge Act data entry, have not completed this particular activity. So I can see all of my 9th grade students. I can see their last names, their first names, usernames, graduation year, and this is true because this year 9th graders are class of 2020. Date completed, again, empty because we've not started the activity. And then I have the status code. This status code is a great option because it changes as your students are saving their occupation. So when a student has not started the particular activity, you'll see no N for no progress. If they've saved a few of the elements, they'll see P for partial. And when they are finished with all of their activities related to this particular report, they'll see a C for complete, and they'll see the date completed. So they'll have double verification. The status code will match the date. So a date completed does not appear until the student has satisfied the requirement. All right. Let's go back up to Bridge tab at the top. And let's go over to 10th grade, move on when ready. So here, my 10th graders have finished the move on when ready activity. So I can see again, name of the report, name of my school, what is this particular report reflecting, what is my percentage of completion, how many students have completed that activity, how many were enrolled. And so again, my status code equals also matches the date in which it was verified. And you also have an opportunity to print out these individual reports and kind of keep them in your physical files. You'll see it will show the system that you're using, what report is it, where are you running this particular report. It'll give you the date stamp, give you the readout. Let's go down to, back up to Bridge. This time we're going to look at 11th grade 3 post-secondary schools. And so here, it shows my records. Again, very same calibration, very same setup. I have one student, which represents 14.29% of my 11th graders, who has successfully saved 3 schools. Who is it? It's Kingsland Warren, and Kingsland finished this activity on August 15th. And lastly, Hovering over bridge, we're going to go down to 12th grade next step. What do you plan to do with all this great information? And so I have my list of students, and I'm glad that this is occurring. So I stated that I have one student who has completed this activity, which is true, because I can see that Milledgeville Randolph completed the activity on August 15th. Now, you will notice that when I first started, I had 8 students that were enrolled under my data entry. But look, I actually had a new student who enrolled. So I have a new 12th grader who now makes my list a total of 9 students. So what I need to do to make sure that my report is correct is that I need to go back up to my student enrollment and change how many records I have so that it is a true representation of what is actually occurring. So now my student enrollment matches my total number of records, and my completion percentage is 11.11. And again, I can print out that information. Something that you may have noticed is that my headers are blue and underlined. I can actually resort this particular report according to the different elements. All right, I'm going to click on home in the upper left-hand corner. Are there any questions about your bridge activities? How do you guys feel about the ease of using the report? All right, I am glad to see the positive comments. Again, we just kind of scratched the surface of the resources that you have available at your fingertips. There's so much more that your students can do and that you can do in terms of your reports with the data. Definitely check out the other webinars because it gives you more food for thought and more resources that you can use to further enhance this particular element. So I would encourage you to go back and preview those other webinars. And someone has asked a great question, how do we view the recorded webinars? They're actually on our home page. And in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a link that says Georgia Career Information Center Webinars. And it will take you to our YouTube page. The one I definitely encourage you guys to do is to go to that Introducing GCIS to High School Site Coordinators. A lot of great information in there, too. All right. I'm going to go ahead and suspend recording.